friends, Amanda here at Bare Bones Living, and today I am just doing a big cooking day. I'm making a chicken tortilla soup that I'm gonna can. I have a bunch of broth that I need to can in my refrigerator. I baked some sourdough that I'm gonna turn into some stuffing for my dad's birthday is this week, and we're having a party for him next weekend, so I'm gonna make some stuffing from that. And then I think that might be it, but I thought I'd bring you guys along with me. So this is just a Saturday midday where I'm trying to get a bunch of food prepared and processed. My refrigerator's full of a bunch of stocks that I had made that I'm trying to use in recipes. I'm in the middle of cooking this chicken tortilla soup that I can up for future meals that are ready to go. I'm still in my pajamas and might as well be comfortable while I'm doing all this. My kitchen is a freaking disaster, but you know, sometimes you just got to do things when you have the opportunity to do them, and this is real life, so I thought I'd bring you guys along with what I was doing. And here I have onions and peppers and spices and canned tomato products that I had made. I have a quart of diced tomatoes and a pint of Rotel tomatoes, and then I just had some extra salsa verde in the refrigerator that I used. And then I took 2 chicken breasts and I cut them in half, and I actually cooked the chicken breasts in like this tomato sauce so that it would help season the chicken. And I'm pretty sure that these are done, so I'm gonna pull these out and start shredding them. And then I'm gonna add some black beans and some kidney beans along with some carrots and celery and corn to get cooked up a little bit. And I just had some frozen carrots in my freezer and some frozen black beans, so those will take a little bit of time to cook down and warm up. And my corn is frozen. And I just cooked up some kidney beans. I'm going to put all these in there. Celery here. Alright. That's probably enough. Gotta be careful, buddy. And I'll just let this cook a little bit while I chop up these chickens, or while I shred up these chicken breasts, and then I'll add those back in. And this soup will be ready for me to can up. I'm going to can this up in quart containers, and that'll be one thing totally done. Okay, so I shredded up the chicken, and I actually didn't put it back into the soup because I wanted to divvy it up into the jars evenly. And I came up with 4 quarts, and then I'll just add the rest of this soup in on top of it. And then in order to make this a full canner, I'm over here, I'm heating up, I made some pork broth from pork bones that I had in my freezer. And I'm heating that up to can, and then I should have a full canner. So I'm just doing like one big heaping scoop of vegetables in each one first to try to evenly disperse or distribute the vegetables, and then I guess I'll just do another one. Alright, so I came up with 4 quarts of soup and 2 quarts and a pint of pork broth, and I'm going to process these at 10 pounds of pressure for 90 minutes. And 90 minutes is for the soup to process. It takes about like 25 minutes for the broth, but it takes 90 for the soup, so they can just process for that length of time and it'll be fine. Okay, so while this has been processing, we just had lunch, which was actually the chicken tortilla soup. I had made a batch 2 days ago just to trial that recipe, and it's delicious. And that's why I had just made that second batch just purely for canning. And now I'm going to move on to making the stuffing for my dad's party next weekend. And I have a pound of sage breakfast sausage that I'm going to cook up with some additional spices. I baked a few loaves of sourdough bread, and then I cubed it up and I let it sit out so it would kind of dry out a little bit. I want them to get dry or stale-ish, so that they soak up all the good spices. And the broth, I'm going to use turkey broth that I made from our Thanksgiving turkey carcass to make this, and then I have some other stuff here. So let me get started on cooking up the sausage. Okay, so I got my cast iron pan here, heating up, a little bit of oil in the bottom, and I'm just gonna dump my sausage in. And this is a pound of sausage. The recipe calls for just ground sausage, but I had sage breakfast sausage, so I just decided to use this. And then the recipe calls for just ground sausage and then adding sage to it. I'm still going to add a little bit of extra sage to it, but I'm going to cut it in half, since this already has sage in it. So I'm only going to add a half tablespoon of sage. And this is homegrown sage. It's going to be kind of a rough estimate. And these are dehydrated whole sage leaves, and I'm just crumbling them in my hand to wake up the flavors. And then salt. Kaya. Shh, lie down. Use the rest of that, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of brown sugar, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, some red pepper flakes, which I don't have that much left. These are homemade red pepper flakes from Cayenne Peppers. But I only need 1/4 of a teaspoon, no, 1/8 of a teaspoon, so that'll be plenty. A 1/4 teaspoon of marjoram, and this is also homegrown. And when you dry fresh herbs, you want to dry them whole, and then, like I said, right when you're using them, you want to crumble them up to wake up the flavors. And then just a pinch of clove, ground clove, and we'll mix this all together to season that pork. Okay, so that meat browned up really nicely. I got some little brown bits on there, add some flavor, and I've just put it on this paper towel to catch some of the grease, and I'll set that aside. And then I have a stick of unsalted butter that I'm gonna melt in that same pan. And then I have fresh minced rosemary, sage, and thyme that I'm gonna add into this butter once it's melted, and I'm gonna basically toast the seasonings. And the sage and the thyme came from my garden. My rosemary was not big enough to harvest any rosemary from, so I did have to purchase that one, but you use what you can, right? And then at that same, just a couple minutes ago, the pressure canner finished its 90 minutes, so I moved it off the heat, and it's coming down on pressure. And once this little nipple here pops down, I can take off the weight and let it continue to cool. It's just gradually cooling. You don't want to do anything rapid to shock your jars or anything, so just kind of let that cool off at the speed that it wants to naturally do that. And then with these other herbs that I didn't end up needing, I'll just put those in my dehydrator and add them to my pantry. Dump these guys in here. Have this over a medium low heat, and I'm also going to add my onion and celery at this point. I'm just going to cook this for about 10 minutes until these vegetables get nice and soft. And then you have that nice flavoring of all those fresh herbs. So it's been about 10 minutes and we have some really nice coloring on our vegetables here. It smells really nice. And now I'm going to add the turkey broth that I made and bring it back to a simmer. I think that's about 3 cups. We'll see. Scrape off any little bits that might be on the bottom. That's all really great flavor. And then once this comes to a simmer, I'm going to actually move it off the heat and let it cool again before we mix it into our bread cubes. So in this bowl, I just put all of my bread cubes in this big bowl, and I have an egg in here with rosemary. I diced up some more rosemary and thyme. The recipe called for parsley, but I don't have any right now, so I just substituted that. And I'm just gonna drizzle this on, and then I'll mix it all up, try to coat as much as I can. There we go. Ooh. And this was just 1 loaf of my sourdough. I know I had mentioned that I had made a couple of loaves, but I just diced up 1 loaf worth. And it's about, I would say, maybe 16 ounces. No, I'm not. I'm actually making 2 different stuffings. One of them is going to be meatless because my brother's girlfriend is a vegetarian, in that she doesn't like to chew on meat. So she's okay with like the turkey broth and things like that, but she doesn't want any of that sausage. So I was just about to dump in the sausage, but no, I'm not. But I will put in our celery onion broth mixture, and I'll stir that around. And I have more broth that I can add to this if I don't think this is gonna be enough to coat all this bread. Like I said, this is a homemade loaf, so I don't really know how much it was. And the recipe called for 16 ounces of bread and 3 cups of broth. So we'll see. Alright, so I have a little casserole dish here that's greased. And then I'll just dot the top of it with some pads of butter for when I cook it. And that looks pretty delicious. And then I'll add the sausage to the rest of this mixture. That looks pretty good. Add this to another casserole dish, and then I'm actually going to freeze these until this weekend. And then I'll thaw them completely and cook them then. So don't these just look great? I just put some pads of butter on the top, and then I put some cellophane on them. And then I'm actually going to put their lids back on just to protect them in our freezer so that nothing pokes through the cellophane. And these are ready to go in the freezer. And then I actually came up with a little extra that wouldn't fit in here, so we'll just eat that as a side to one of our meals, and that'll go in the freezer as well. So that project is done, and I can put these down in the freezer for this weekend. Thank you guys for stopping by today and joining in on our journey here at Bare Bones Living. We'll catch you on the next one.